it's self-defeating. But also, it's all that because of the missed opportunity, as you have already alluded to put more pressure on Putin. Putin's ruse is that he's strong, but hey, he's in a very weak position right now.
And welcome to the program, U.S. former General H.R. McMaster, who is a former senior U.S. Army commander who also served as National Security Advisor to President Trump in President Trump's first term. General, welcome to you.
John, great to be with you.
It's good to have you here. Thank you for making time for this. So I'm going to move now from a story which is filling the news agenda here in the UK to a story which has been on and filling the news agenda, well, of the world for a good long while now, and which seems to have taken a particular turn. And I'm talking now about Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, and what looks like a very significant statement from President Trump overnight, General, in an interview for the Reuters news agency, when he said the obstacle to progress to peace in Ukraine that was the question, he said Zelensky, not Putin, Zelensky. And when he was asked why he said that, he said, I just think he's having a hard time getting there. General, I suggest that's simply just not true, and that President Trump seems to be buying and regurgitating President Putin's position here.
Yeah, this is all part of Russia's propaganda campaign. Putin's ruse to appear that Russia's in a very strong and that Russian victory in Ukraine, complete victory in Ukraine, which would be the subjugation of the entire country, is inevitable. And then, of course, you also have Putin, who likes to blame Europe for everything. Right? This is part of his ruse as well. That Europe is the one who threatened him, encircled him. He plays the victim when of course he's an aggressor who's committed horrible crimes against humanity. So it's disappointing. I think that I have faith still that ultimately Putin, because of his intransigence, will disabuse Trump of this idea, that there can be some kind of an accommodation with Putin. And Trump, we have to realize he's not the first leader to labor under this delusion that he can bring Putin in from the cold. I mean, how long did Chancellor Merkel try to do that, or even previous U.S. presidents? So I hope that he comes to his senses about this soon, and I have my confidence in Putin that Putin will convince him ultimately that obviously Russia is the obstacle to peace. Not only in connection with Ukraine, but how about the broader shadow war that Russia is waging against Europe and the United States? This is the cyber-enabled information warfare, but also physical warfare, blowing up train tracks and warehouses and cutting undersea cables and putting bombs on DHL aircraft. So I think, it's really important to highlight the broader aggression that Russia's undertaking and the connection between Russia and the other axis of aggressors.
Yes.
We have got North Korean soldiers fighting on European soil. We have Russia providing to the Iranians just in the last couple of weeks attack helicopters and armored vehicles. Well, where do you think they're going to be used? They're going to be used against the Iranian people. So I think it's really important to recognize that China is underwriting this whole darn war in Europe. So I think those are the arguments to make to President Trump, is the broader campaign of aggression that Putin's on, his broader objectives, which is to break NATO apart and to reestablish the Russian Empire. I mean, that's really what he wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, and as you know better than most of us, General, yes, there have been hopes in the past, with American presidents as well as other leaders, of building bridges to Vladimir Putin. But those hopes and those attempts predated the invasion of Ukraine. And these latest comments from the president, they follow, with a great deal of fanfare, the creation of a 20-point peace plan between Ukraine and the United States and Ukraine's friends in Europe. Now, that seems to have been held below the waterline. And any hope that, and I think you acknowledge it yourself, that President Putin, he may well be eventually forced to the table, but that will take more pressure. And the hope of more pressure, which would have to come very significantly from America, seems to have been seriously undercut by these latest remarks from President Trump. You say it's disappointing. It's more than disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I would say add self-defeating to that, right? Exactly. So, I think there's an opportunity, and so it's disappointing. It's self-defeating. But also, it's all that because of the missed opportunity, as you have already alluded to put more pressure on Putin. Putin's ruse is that he's strong, but hey, he's in a very weak position right now. You have a huge labor shortage. You have inflation, over 20%. They're spending over 50% of the federal budget on defense. Is not sustainable, and so he's sitting on piles of cash that he can't
Yes.
convert. The price of oil is going down, which is hurting him financially as well. And he's losing his clients around the world, right? The Assad regime gone. Maduro's out of the picture, right? Look at the pressure on Iran. So hey, why not increase the pressure on to incentivize it?
Yes.
Because really he is the really the only obstacle to peace. He's the guy who started the war.
Yes.
In 2014, right? So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's time to put more pressure on Putin. But Europeans can do a lot more too. It would be nice to be able to get past the obstacles to using the Russian seized assets to help support Ukraine, for example. And one of the reasons why Putin gets away with this, is he plays to some people's grievances about Europe. That Europe was free riding on the largesse of American taxpayers.
Yes.
As we covered European defense bills, and indirectly underwrote, European social spending. But hey, Trump's winning that now, right? I mean, European nations, UK, in the lead of this, is investing more in defense, building up defense capacity, sharing more of the burden, and hey, we all need to be rowing together against this axis of authoritarians.
Yes.
And recognize that we need the largest economies, the EU, US, the UK, Japan, others, to confront other forms of aggression like Chinese economic aggression.
Yes. And many people, I imagine, General, would think all of that is absolutely true. And yet we have, on another front, an enormous amount of tension, serious tension being built up between the United States and its former friends and former allies, and now still partners in NATO. And I'm talking obviously about Greenland. General, what are your thoughts on the sight that we saw just yesterday of the president and the vice president still keeping open the option of claiming and taking ownership of Greenland, which is a territory of a NATO ally, which, as you know, is fueling alarm that America seems to have ceased to be a friend or an ally to its former partners in Europe? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I would just say, hey, Greenland is strategic. Greenland is important to all of our security, especially in the area of missile defense. The threat from Russia and others across the Arctic Circle. You just had the first Chinese ship, transnavigate the Arctic. So, yeah, okay, it's important, but again, it's just the way to go about it is to emphasize, sovereignty and security rather than to engage in rhetoric and threats that that would undermine security and undermine the alliance. I mean, this is kind of a gift to Vladimir Putin too, because it's sowing more dissent, among NATO allies. What Putin really is using Ukraine in part to do is to break apart the NATO alliance and break apart the transatlantic alliance. His main method for doing that is to try to get President Trump to sign up for terms for a ceasefire in the Ukraine war that are unacceptable to Ukraine and Europe, and then break us apart that way. But hey, let's not help him break NATO apart with this rhetoric on Denmark and on Greenland.
Now, I mean, you could easily argue and mount a strong argument that the idea of America coming into armed conflict with NATO partners over Greenland seems absolutely outlandish, almost impossible to imagine. But the tension between the partners is very real. And I spoke in recent days to General Philip Breedlove, who you, I'm sure, will know personally. He's, of course, a former Supreme Allied Commander in Europe for the United States. Now, he told me this. He said, had he been ordered to take part in any military operation to take Greenland, he'd have refused that order. Remarkable thing to hear, General. Can I ask you, how would you deal with such an order?
John, it's not gonna happen.
No,
so
but it was a mark of the strength of his feeling, wasn't it?
We're not going to worry. We shouldn't worry about it. So here's, we're at the 250th anniversary of the unpleasantries between our two countries in the 18th century, right? We're at the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence is this year, and then that led to a constitution. that was based on really the English Civil War and the lessons of Oliver Cromwell's seizure of power. So we have a constitution that's very strong in the separation of powers. The president does have significant authorities under Article 2 of the Constitution to defend the country, so he can take discrete military actions. But control over war and peace lies with the Congress. If the Congress exerts its will, which it would in this circumstance. And you've seen lots of statements, from senators and congressmen saying, "Hey, this is crazy. Saying we take Greenland by force."
But it is general. It does seem to be the case that some Republicans on Capitol Hill in Washington, they've moved to block a piece of legislation which had the intention of taking back to Congress the right to say yes or no to military action, including in Greenland.
Yeah. Well, I think what they're doing is Republicans are protecting, the president's, what they see as the president's authority in some of these areas, like Venezuela, for example. These are all interconnected, obviously. So I think, what you're going to see pretty soon is a shift to really a diplomatic and economic effort to strengthen Greenland's defense, and it'll be cooperative. This is kind of what. Yeah, and I don't agree with this technique, but this is kind of President Trump's technique is you put an extreme position out there to begin the negotiation, and when I was serving in his administration in 2017 to 2018, he often was inclined to just do that. Hey, let's just pull out of the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Let's pull out right now. And the idea was that would put us in a better negotiating position for renegotiating that trade agreement, which became USMCA. And many of us would say, hey, well, that would really break, really put a lot of strain in our relationships. It might make the negotiation a lot harder, and it would interject a lot of uncertainty into the market and the trade and investment.
General, I can tell you, I'd love to spend an hour or 2 hours talking to you. I do not have that luxury. I do want to put one final brief question to you, if I may. Another point regarding the president, who has said just a very short while ago, he was contemplating, invoking the Insurrection Act in relation to the state of Minnesota, where there has been unrest over the shooting of a suspected illegal migrant, and of course the shooting of the woman who was a protesting about the ICE operations. The Insurrection Act allows for the president to bring the regular army onto the streets of an American city. In a word, if I may, General, your thought on that?
Yeah, my thought would be that the circumstances don't warrant it, and there are times when you could invoke it, for example, or use federal troops, maybe even without invoking the Insurrection Act, to protect property, to protect citizens, and so forth. But what's really, John, what's so sad about this is that we're in this cycle, of vitriolic partisanship, and at the core of it is the fact that a Democratic governor and mayor refused to cooperate with federal forces, on these issues of immigration. And a lot of that has to do with the tactics that have been employed and so forth. And what you should have, ideally, in our federal system of government is cooperation between municipalities and state and federal government in areas we can all agree on, which is like, hey, law enforcement, and protecting communities and reducing crime. But what's happened is all this has become performative, and it's the narrative is designed to score partisan political points. And so what the mission is gets lost in the performative politics.
I have to move on. But General H.R. McMaster, former security advisor to the president, been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.